Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, today we are continuing what we started talking about last time. Last episode, we talked about the 9 worthies who were thought of as exemplars in the Middle Ages.
Right.
And in our discussion, we thought, well, the list is incomplete, but also the categories, they were categorized by Christian, pagan, and Jews who weren't so bad. And
the okay Jews, the great Christians, the great pagans, and the okay Jews.
And so we thought, well, that's not really how we would categories.
And the fact that they were all sort of warrior, conqueror, kings type characters, they just happened to be of 3 different religious faiths.
So we decided that we would divide them differently. We'd create our own categories,
right?
Which are the arts, spirituality and or peace, thought or intellect, and physical achievement.
Right. Well, we had 4 categories, and the other one was
those are 4 categories:
arts,
spirituality, peace, thought, intellect.
Oh, intellect. Right. Okay, you did say
physical achievement. Right. And so, and then that we would pick our own 12 words. We expanded it to 12, 3 from each category, and thought we would go from 1500 to 1800, and then the next episode would do 1800 to the present day.
Just so we could narrow the field enough to pick 12.
Yes. And before we begin, though, this required a good deal of thought, some research, some effort, which can cause one to engender a great thirst.
Oh, yeah.
How, pray tell,
we definitely deserve to reward ourselves for all of our hard work.
How are you doing that this evening?
I am, in keeping with our last episode, I've got the Four Roses small batch bourbon whiskey, one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And you, sir?
Oh, I have Uncle Nearest 1856 bourbon, straight up with a large round block of ice. And I heard a lot about how good this was, and it lives up to its reputation.
Yep, we had a bottle of that a couple of months ago. It was very nice. It's light. It's not as heavy as a lot of so not as quite as sweet. So cheers.
So I think Uncle Nearest, he tops the list.
He's going to start out as one of your worthies. Okay. Well, so who are the worthies there? We got Uncle Nearest, Jack Daniels.
Uncle Nearest taught Jack Daniels.
True, that's true. Actually, yeah.
I think Dom Perignon.
Okay.
Perignon, the monk who invented champagne.
Or discovered it, at any rate.
Well, and Winston Churchill was quoted as saying, remember, gentlemen, we are not merely liberating France, we are fighting for champagne. But I thought I would mention just quickly some of the pre-1500 worthies, just who were not mentioned, from various categories.
Sure.
So Aristotle, 4th century BCE. Aristotle's thought governed the philosophy for a very long time.
And his method
Yes.
His approach.
Aristotelian.
Yes, exactly. Hence the name. So
and Platonic, which because Plato wrote about him, so Platonic method. So yes. I also thought William Marshall, knight of the late 12th, early 13th century, who became the protector of the realm during the infancy of the heir. He's exemplar of knighthood.
Well, it's worth noting that the 9 worthies that we spoke of were put together by a Frenchman.
Yes.
And the only contemporary knight in the list is French.
Yes, and he was considered the first crusader.
Yes.
Which in my mind is not a recommendation. So
he captured he recaptured the city of Jerusalem was his main thing.
So I think Marco Polo, 13th, last half of the 13th, first quarter of the 14th century, was physically, I mean, that's a real act of physical bravery to travel like that at that time, following the Silk Road. Yeah, I mean, it was established, but uncounted dangers, and then to write about it, really accomplished. I think Dante Alighieri, late 13th, early 14th century, Dante was really considered, and still is, the preeminent poet of the Italian language. And his conception of hell still governs a lot of modern thought, even though it was a fictionalization. So,
well, yeah, quite. Well, I don't think we don't have any factual, accounts of descending into hell, as far as I know. They all have to be fictionalized.
I was going to make a pithy comment here, but about
until you write about your first marriage.
Yeah, exactly. You know where I was going.
Yeah, I sure did.
I would put Boccaccio and Chaucer, 14th century.
Chaucer certainly survives as a personality. I'm not sure what necessarily would.
The Canterbury Tales are.
Yeah, absolutely. He survives, but my criteria for an actual worthy might be a little higher.
Okay. Well, then Lorenzo de Medici.
I'm behind that one.
Yeah, 15th century was, I mean, really established the Medici and led. I mean, Italy was still a fractured city-states, but he really was a patron of the arts, and
yes,
I mean, so many different things. He's very much a model of what people think of as the Renaissance man.
Right. Well, yeah, soldier, patron of the arts,
right,
diplomat, ruler.
But those are the pre-1500. Some of the pre-1500 worthies, and there are many, many more. But now we come to 1500 to 1800 and our worthies. Which category would you like to dive into first?
I've got the intellectual first in my list.
Okay, who's your first?
My first one is John Locke.
I also have John Locke.
Excellent. I'm very interested to see who we overlap on here.
Yeah. Well, Locke's ideas of that the authority of government stems from the social contract, which is based on the rights of people, and that the authority of government requires the consent of the governed. Without Locke's ideas, I mean, Locke's Locke's ideas were the foundation of the establishment of the United States in a lot of ways.
Certainly of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And he is known as the father of liberalism.
Yes. John Locke, 1632 to 1704.
Yep.
Yes. Completely agree with that.
It is his life, liberty, and property were his three natural laws. The right to have your life, your liberty, and your property.
Right.
So I think what I found interesting as I was researching this more too was I found this quote it's from Wikipedia, I think. The state of nature is pre-political, but it is not pre-moral. I thought that was a really interesting observation.
Yeah, given that we have said before that human evolution favored social creatures, social beings, and social beings establish a social contract and ethics to have functioning societies. So therefore, what he's calling morals existing in nature makes sense.
Yeah. So good. I'm glad we agree on that one.
Yes. So I will start one here, Sir Isaac Newton.
I also have Sir Isaac Newton.
1642 to 1626 or
1727.
1727. Yes. Thank you. His Principia Mathematica of 1687 really he was instrumental in changing alchemy into science.
Yeah. Right.
And people still talk about his three laws of motion, and calculus. Yeah, I invented that a while ago. Here, it's in a drawer.
Seems to me that he ended up what I remember was he invented calculus, or at least found his use for calculus in demonstrating his gravitational laws of universal gravitation, which were also his laws of motion and also gravitation. I mean, they say Newton discovered gravity. Well, no, everybody knew what gravity was. He just found the mathematical principles that govern it.
Right.
And he advanced early modern chemistry. As you said, he invented the reflecting telescope.
Well, yes, because the direct telescope.
Right.
So when I was in the fifth grade, my fifth grade teacher, we had a test, and the question was, who invented the telescope? And I said, a Dutch eyeglass maker.
Yeah.
Galileo used it as
astronomy,
but he did not invent it. It was considered a toy. He simply applied it. She counted it wrong, my answer. So I brought in my encyclopedia and my mother and confronted the teacher, who said, "Oh, I didn't count it wrong." When I showed her in the encyclopedia, I didn't count it wrong. I said, "Well, yes, you did. Let me see the test." She said, "Oh, I threw those away." And as we left, I turned to my mother and I said, "She lied to me." And my mother said, "Yes, she did." And that is the real lesson of this experience, that some adults don't tell the truth.
He did do a lot of studying of optics.
Yes,
around lenses and so on, and he had lots of theories about how. Now we look at them as kind of quaint and archaic. His ideas of how light moved through mediums and different things like that. And he did a lot of studies, but
still, he was a leader. He was original.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We both have him on our lists. Then he must be right. I mean, that must be the right answer.
Who is next on your list?
My third, following sort of John Locke was Immanuel Kant.
Okay, not on my list, but
well, he is a pure philosopher, and he gets deeper into rationality. He proposes what he calls a categorical imperative.
Yeah.
And that there is a universal good that is beyond God or freedom or any of that stuff, that it is based on duty, and your duty is to humanity.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I can see why you have him on your list.
Yeah. He takes Locke's principles of democracy and self-determination, and he says, now, okay, yes, you're self-determined. What guides that self-determination? It is this sort of universal morality, that here are things that you should do, that one must do. These are imperatives. These are commands, which to me was an interesting choice of words where we talk about the commandments.
Right.
But he's saying that is this self-determination, these general laws of nature that structure all of our experience. Human reason gives itself the moral law. So,
yeah. I considered him, but I thought Locke. For me, Locke was more preeminent than Kant, but I think he's a worthy runner-up.
Okay. And your third, you have a third for?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, see, he's one of those, and he is on my list of 12, but yes, further down.
Right. But, so he is, and I thought about where to put him, but given his, yes, he's certainly well known as an artist, but his anatomical drawings, his sketchbooks, his inventions, his writings, I put him into the thought and intellect category, because for him, painting was an expression of his intellect, and he also experimented with anatomy and all sorts of things. So Da Vinci, and now he 1452 to 1519. So he's into the 1500s. So
he also, which I think helps justify his place in this category, is that he also studied and taught painting like a science.
Yes.
So I think I'm perfectly okay with that inclusion. I mean, that's, like I said, I struggled with where to put him too.
And did you you said who your third was.
Yeah. Well, we both agreed on Newton.
Right.
So mine were Locke, Kant, and Newton.
And mine were Locke, Newton, and Da Vinci.
Yeah.
I did have some runners up.
Okay. Some honorable mentions.
Rene Descartes.
Very good.
Not only philosophy, cogito sum ergo, but also Cartesian mathematics, and so I thought he was a worthy mention.
Yep.
Did you have runners up?
Let me see if I had him in this category. Thomas Hobbes was a runner-up.
Yep.
Philosophy. But that's all I had in this category.
I also had Copernicus.
Yes.
And Galileo.
Yes.
Runners up. But I think they're second to Isaac Newton. So,
as far as the effect they had,
yes,
going forward out of history, yes.
Yep. So, good. Some, 2/3 overlap. I think that's pretty good. What category next would you?
I had the tougher category I found in this particular era, the peace spiritual category.
Yeah, I only came up with two things.
I came up with two people and a third thing.
And I only came up with two things. So
okay, so let's see.
What's your first person?
Then? The first person was Jacobus Collier. Now we talked about, not very well known. I had to really dig because we talked about this, how when you raised the category of peace, I thought of people who engendered peace.
Okay.
Who's a person who actually caused peace to manifest somewhere or throughout the world or whatever. I mean, actually had a hand in making peace. And now those are hard to come by.
Yeah.
And I found that it's a testimony, a negative testimony to our natures, that people are more famous for causing wars than they are for stopping wars.
Well, to quote Hobbes, nasty tradition short, right?
Yeah, right. So, but Jacobus Collier was an actual diplomat. He was 1657 and died 1725. The concept of a professional diplomat did not really exist before the 17th century.
Okay, so I'll interrupt you here because the two things that I had were the Peace of Westphalia.
That's my thing.
Because it ended the 30 Years' War, but it
and the 80 Years'
model for what permanent diplomatic representation could be. And then my second thing was the establishment of permanent diplomatic representation. So those two things, this peace treaty that ended things, established this, and then the establishment of permanent diplomatic representation, which really by 1800 it really became the standard for how it was done.
Yeah, this what's the quote here? Created the framework for modern international relations.
Yep.
Treaty. National self-determination, precedent for ending wars through diplomatic congresses.
Yep.
Peaceful coexistence among sovereign states as the norm. Maintained by a balance of power among sovereign states and acceptance of principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of other sovereign states. Those were what were established in that treaty.
Diplomacy as a distinct institution developed after the 16th century, coming out of the Peace of Westphalia, and so that became standard. And I remember the movie The Remains of the Day, I think, in which there's a scene in England. It's a formal dining room, and Christopher Reeve plays an American ambassador, and he stands up and addresses all the nobility in the room, the lords in the room, and says, quite frankly, gentlemen, all of you are amateurs, and the world cannot afford amateurs in diplomacy, and lectures them. And I think that I was reminded of that. Great.
Yeah. I've seen that scene. I don't think I've seen the whole film, but I've seen that clip.
Yeah, it's a good scene, but I mean, it's a good movie. Good movie.
And just so that
Emma Thompson, really good.
Okay. Now, and to sort of put some names and faces on the treaty, the Holy Roman Emperor was Maximilian, and my source says that it was his understanding of what was actually going on that was probably led to this treaty. The French envoys were under Henri II, but the Marquis de Sable and the Comte de Davos were the real agents of France. So those were if we had to put persons in the place of that thing, those are the people that are probably most responsible for that.
Yep.
So that leads to my Jacobus Collier, who helped to write the Treaty of Karlowitz, or at least negotiate the Treaty of Karlowitz and the Treaty of Passarowitz. But he is the one who is essentially, through his diplomatic efforts, stopped the Ottoman Empire from continuing to attack Eastern Europe, and for good or ill, gained lots of concessions for the Habsburgs.
Well, the Habsburgs were considered losers generally, though, in the peace treaty of Westphalia, because
in Westphalia,
yeah,
this is late. This is
later, though. They continued for a long time.
50 years later. Well, the Treaty of Karlowitz was signed in 1699, and the Treaty of Passarowitz was signed in 1718. So he had a long career, and it was all about between Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans. So, but that changed the face of Europe. That might otherwise become quite different than the way it is now. So,
well, good. I think we completely overlapped on this one. I think.
Yeah.
Names.
I have a third person too. Do you?
Oh, yes. No.
My third person was Benjamin Franklin, who was another one of those hard to categorize.
Oh, excellent choice. Yeah. Really excellent choice. Well,
and we should probably say that, and I recognize as I'm going through all this, that this is a very Western-centric list.
Yes, I thought
just
about
because Eastern sources are much harder to find.
I thought, well, harder. They're less familiar to.
Yes.
But yeah, that I thought about that as I was going through this. I could have very easily, for the ancient world, have included Sun Tzu and the Bodhidharma and there's so many. I still think the Bodhidharma founded what became Zen Buddhism and also what became Kung Fu. And that's quite an accomplishment. So, but in the ancient world, but yeah, the certainly the Western history is more familiar to both of us.
Right. And I mean, to our defense, really, the whole concept of worthies is a Western concept too. So
yeah,
that's what we're basing it on. So, but Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790, was 83 years old.
Yeah.
Through all of his adventures and misadventures, because there were several of those too. But I thought he was a good addition to this list because he was a diplomat, instrumental in writing our Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation.
Well, and in getting French support for the revolution.
And that's as a diplomat, that's what he did, yes. But he was also an inventor and writer, publisher, editor, printer. He invented the lightning rod.
Yes.
Bifocals.
Yes.
Swim fins, which I was not aware of. The Franklin stove.
Yes.
The eponymous stove. The odometer.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure what form his odometer took exactly. I'm sure it isn't the digital one that we think of, but the urinary catheter.
You've been a young lad who followed you around counting up.
Yeah. It was just a wheel that you drag behind your horse and it clicked over every farthing or furlong or something. I don't know. The urinary catheter, which I'm not sure I appreciate so much, and the very obscure but quite fascinating instrument called the harmonica.
I've heard an harmonica played.
Yes.
For those who don't know, an harmonica is, if you've ever wet your finger and run it on a glass and made a sound, an harmonica is a series of glasses tuned with amounts of water in them that are played as
they're on a shaft, and they're all spinning at different, because they're different diameters, right? So playing one is an art by itself.
Yeah, it's really good.
But it's an amazingly ethereal sounding instrument.
Well, good. Yeah, thank you. That was good.
Now, and beyond, okay, so just to fill out all the reason why he's on this list for me is he made numerous discoveries in electricity. He was a postmaster general both for the Crown of England and for the United States. Established the first public libraries, the first public fire company, a community hospital, not a private hospital or doctors, but a community hospital in Philadelphia. And the Treaty of Paris with Britain ending the Revolutionary War, and the Declaration of Independence, and the Articles of Confederation. Now there's a great quote here from someone, Henry Steele Commager, a historian, who said, in Franklin could be merged the virtues of Puritanism without its defects, and the illumination of the Enlightenment without its heat.
Oh, good quotation.
That is, isn't it?
Yeah, Franklin. That was a very good choice.
Okay, good. I got a winner. Hit that one out of the park.
Okay. So, and what is your next category?
My next category is arts.
Arts. Okay.
Which is where I put Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
And since we've already discussed him, what I found interesting in researching him more than I remembered from my college art history class was he was a sculptor, mathematician, architect, inventor, all those things, and everybody knows that. But he's famous almost as much for his speculations and unfinished works.
Yes. Yeah.
As for the relatively small handful of finished paintings and sculptures that he actually got to make.
He was interested in doing the next thing.
Well, and some of his projects were so large and ambitious, doing them for patrons, that they would run out of money or lose interest, or a war would break out, and the great horse of Sforza, the Sforza horse.
Yep.
The bronze was already set aside, and the model was made, and they ended up pouring cannons instead.
Yes.
His war had broken out.
Is a replica of it, it's a full-size replica of the horse in West Michigan at the Meyer Sculpture Garden, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
I was unaware of that.
Yeah, quite sizable.
Well, it's supposed to be 16 feet tall.
Yeah. So for arts, Michelangelo.
Okay.
I have seen the Sistine Chapel. I've seen the Pietà. I've seen the David. It's everybody knows images of those, but when you see them in person, it's I was speechless. He was absolutely all that. Phenomenal work. And so he was one of mine in the arts for 1500, 1800. He was born 1475, died 1564. So
his career was within our period.
Yes.
And he was in my honorable mentions list for the arts.
Okay.
And I was like, him or Da Vinci? Da Vinci was just such a polymath, though. I thought he edged him out.
This is why I put him in thought.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I had Rembrandt instead of Michelangelo.
So I have Rembrandt as a honorable mention, as a runner-up.
Okay. All right. So
because I consider Rembrandt is important. I think because of what he did, but there's a technique called sfumato, which means smoky, like smoky edged. But Rembrandt didn't invent that, but he perfected it. And so his work had his brush strokes. There was a liveliness, there was a immediacy, there was a life in his work that was just phenomenal. Yeah,
and he was incredibly prolific too.
Yeah, but he was a runner-up for me.
Okay, so that's fair.
I had William Shakespeare.
He was also on my runners-up.
1564 to 1616. He was a Klingon originally.
Yes, you hear Hamlet in the original Klingon.
Shakespeare still, 500 years later, his works are still performed and still meaningful and still relevant to the human experience. So,
well, there's a lot. I mean,
and he coined more words. He created more original words and turns of phrase than any other author in the English language.
Yeah, certainly. There's some theories, postulations, whatever, that I'm not saying that somebody else wrote his work, but that he was like George Lucas, right? He took very popular themes and that were folk tales and so on, and then codified them, expanded them, narrowed them in different ways, and made great works out of them.
Yes. I was teaching a class some years ago, and I mentioned Shakespeare, as I often do, and the students groaned, and I said, what's that for? And one of the students said, oh, Shakespeare, he's so full of cliches. And I laughed. I said, they weren't cliches when he wrote them for the first time, and he invented them. And one of the students said, oh, Shakespeare was the OG. And I said, okay, you please explain that. I don't know what that means. Please explain. And he explained the original gangster. I said, and I laughed. I said, Shakespeare would have loved that. And he said, really? And I explained that Shakespeare wrote for not only the upper classes in the boxes, but the groundlings standing on the ground. He wrote for everybody. There are lots of dirty jokes in Shakespeare.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. So somebody posted a question, name a Shakespeare play that has like sexual content or dirty content in it. And I responded, name one that doesn't.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, every one of them. So
I mean, I think the go-to would be Much Ado About Nothing, because that's all of it is.
No, Much Ado About Nothing is in itself a dirty pun.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying that would be if you had to pick the one. Here's the best example of Shakespeare going crazy with his sexual innuendo. It's this
everywhere.
One. Yeah. Almost every joke, every bit of humor, every visual in the play is some kind of body innuendo.
Well, even in Hamlet, and I mean, there's just all over the place. So, so Shakespeare is on my list. Who's your?
Well, I was feeling the need to include music.
Yes.
In the arts here, so I had kind of a tie between Vivaldi and Mozart.
Okay, and who did you choose?
Well, I picked Vivaldi only because I think in his time he was more influential and he had a longer career.
Okay. And I also put Mozart as a runner-up because as phenomenal as he was, his career was short.
And he was dissolute as an individual.
But I did not pick Vivaldi. I remember someone saying Vivaldi did not write, I'm making up the number, 56 violin concertos. He wrote one violin concerto 56 times. And okay. I like Vivaldi. I enjoy Vivaldi, but I picked Bach, Johann Sebastian.
Okay. Yeah, another good choice, I think.
Yes. I think his music was more influential. And I'm a big fan of his descendant PDQ Bach.
Okay.
Well, that's a joke for people who don't know. PDQ Bach is a fictional character and some very funny music, classical music. But so Bach was my okay. My runners up were Mozart, Rembrandt, and Raphael.
Yeah, Raphael too. Although
Raphael was for a long time considered the best painter of his era, but I still think he's significant, but and brilliant, but there are others. I think Michelangelo is more important.
I would agree, but yeah, all of these are stellar figures, certainly. But having to narrow it down, you have to make some kind of decision somewhere. So that leaves us to the physical.
Yes, it does. I've only got two for that.
Okay.
So
who's your first?
Simon de Bolivar.
Is he within the period?
1783 to 1830.
Ooh, just barely. He's just squeaked in there.
Yeah. He was a military and political leader. He was Venezuelan, but he's known as El Libertador, the liberator of America. He led revolutions that freed South American countries from Spain
and Portugal.
Right. Yes. So very significant, still honored. The country of Bolivia is named after him. So Simon de Bolivar, I think.
Okay. Yep. Good choice. I think I missed him because of his just being on the cusp.
Yeah, right at the edge. Yeah.
This was a little harder also because a lot of the ones I picked first turned out to be real pricks.
Yes.
But my first one, and one of these is probably is extremely famous. The other two maybe a little less so. William Adams, English pilot, navigator. Maybe I think this guy's life, I think, is who was fictionalized in the series Shogun.
Oh, okay.
English navigator in 1600, first Englishman to reach Japan.
Yep. Okay.
A ship called Die Liefde, it's a German ship, under the leadership of Jacob Quakerneck, which I think is just a great name. Only surviving vessel of a 5-ship expedition launched by a Dutch, Rotterdam, Netherlands. But he became a key advisor to Shogun Tokugawa.
Yep.
He directed construction for the shogun of the first Western-style ships in the country. Later part of Japan's approving of the establishment of trading factories by the Netherlands. He was mostly a merchant advisor to the shogun, but was given the rank of samurai and presented with the long and short with the daisho.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. Wow.
He has been recognized as one of the most influential foreigners in Japan during this period. So
very good.
That's my first one.
Okay. So my second one, Gottfried von Berlichingen. Gets of the Iron Hand, 1480, 1562. He was a knight and a poet. He lost his right hand from cannon fire, and he had prosthetic iron hands and could hold a shield or reins or a quill pen because he was a poet. He continued his military adventures and feuds also. He was active he was an active knight for 47 years.
Wow.
Goethe wrote a play based on his life, and quoted him saying, he can lick my ass, which became known as the Goetz salute or Schwabian salute.
Okay.
That was he. Reading about him reminded me of, well, William Marshall, who was an active knight till he was very old in his. So that and I cannot judge at this point whether the military campaigns and feuds were valid because or honorable, but he seemed to have been an honorable knight. So in service as he was. So he's my second one.
Okay. My second one is Antoine de la Motte Cadillac. And it's local to us. He was born Antoine Lomé, French explorer and adventurer in New France, which was basically the eastern seaboard of North America.
Yes.
He rose from a modest beginning in 1683 as an explorer, trapper, trader of alcohol and furs, achieving various positions of political importance. He was commander of Fort du Bois de in St. Ignace, Michigan.
Okay.
In 1694. In 1701, he founded Fort Pontchartrain du Detroit, Fort Detroit, which has become the city of Detroit. He was a commandant of the fort until 1710, and between 1710 and 1716, he was the governor of Louisiana under the French king. Although he didn't actually go to Louisiana until 1713. So and the Cadillac car is named after him because it was made in Detroit, and the Cadillac logo is his arms.
Okay. The Cadillac logo has started as it's
very stylized now.
It has become much more stylized. Yeah.
But the original emblem on the hood, the ornament of the Cadillac, were his. The arms it was granted by the King of France after he did all this service.
His arms had little birds on them. They're known as
martlets. Yes.
And I once explained to a Cadillac client when I was
Cadillac executive.
I explained that they were the arms of Cadillac, and these were little birds were known as martlets. And they looked at me like I was insane. Like the Pontiac people didn't know that the logo, they called it the Dart. It was a stylized arrowhead.
Yeah.
Chief Pontiac.
Right.
And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? Chief who? Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
So Anyway,
you got a lot of stories about clueless auto execs.
Yeah, you. I was talking to I was actually talking to the showrunner of a TV show, fictional comedy TV show about an auto company, a fictional auto company, and I said, "Man, it's painfully real." So,
so okay, who's you? Oh, you only have two?
I say that bourbon must be really good that you're drinking because you are out of focus.
Oh, you're right. I wonder what's going on with my camera there. I don't know. I didn't touch anything.
Except the bourbon. That's
except the bourbon. Yeah, I mean, bourbon's supposed to be a sedative. If I was having amphetamines, maybe my outline, I'm vibrating at such a speed.
That could be. So I only had two. Who was your third?
My third was Captain James Cook.
Okay. Yeah, I looked at a lot of explorers, and so many of them were colonizers, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I settled on him, because it was an age of exploration.
Yes.
And yet it was also an age of exploitation.
Yes.
But Cook was pretty much a pure explorer. I mean, he was looking for, as most explorers did, looking for a mercantile sea passage for a lot of his exploration. But he peacefully changed the map of the world.
Okay.
More than any other single man in history. He wasn't a colonizer, mainly because the places he was sailing around were pretty much uninhabited or uninhabitable.
Okay.
He conducted 3 expeditions in the Pacific Ocean. Oh, he was born in 1728, died in 1779. 3 expeditions to the Pacific, ranging from the Antarctic to the Bering Strait, and from the coast of North America to Australia and New Zealand. I mean, he covered vast tracts of ocean. But another thing that I thought was interesting is that part of what allowed him to do some of these things is he had set new standards of cleanliness and ventilation in cruise quarters. The seamen that sailed with him, he insisted on an appropriate diet, that kept them healthy. The health in which he maintained his sailors made his name a naval byword. So he was also an innovator in seamanship.
Yeah.
So he says he set new standards of thoroughness in discovery, in navigation, cartography, the care of men at sea, in relations with indigenous peoples, both friendly and hostile, and in the application of science at sea. So I thought, okay, of all the explorers, because I did that too, all the explorers I looked at were real bastards.
Yeah.
Were mostly funded by people who wanted to exploit a new land.
Yeah, as you said, the age of exploration, which it's often referred to as, was also the age of exploitation. So,
yeah. So I think Cook was an exemplar of those people.
Good, very good choice. I think that we've covered our 12 worthies for the period.
Yes.
I'm sure that there are people we've left out.
Oh, certainly. We had to pare it down somehow. But if anybody out there who has a better suggestion, please write it in the comments. Send us a message, and maybe we'll talk about it next week when somebody comes up with one that we completely missed that would have been a perfect addition to our list. We'll mention it next episode.
And we will continue this discussion with our 12 worthies in 4 categories for the period of 1800 to the present day.
I cut mine off at 2000.
2000.
Just
Okay. Well, Soupy Sales is still on the list then.
okay. All right. And I think people will, any of our viewers will find this next list a lot more recognizable, obviously. From 1800 to 2000, these are modern people, essentially.
Yeah.
We're talking about. So,
cool.
Yeah. And the toughest part of that one was, for me, was the science one, because the huge exploration in science, or huge explosion of scientific discovery after 1800.
I'm still working on my list. So.
Well, yeah, and we originally were going to try and do all this in one episode, but I thought, no, we couldn't.
No way.
We need more time to do a little more in-depth study on some of these, and I'm glad I did, because, like I said, some of the explorers and even some of the philosophers I found really turned out to be not good exemplars.
Yes, unworthies.
Yeah,
which in fact would be an interesting subject for a follow-up episode. The unworthies.
Yeah.
Who are the worst people in history?
Boy, that would be an equally hard list to put together, because history has some really awful people. I mean, as a species, we're pretty awful in general. So picking the worst of us, geez.
Yeah, dumb panicky animals.
Yeah, right.
And black, right? So I think that's food for thought. Please let us know what you think. Please like, subscribe, and share. Send us your comments and suggestions. And thank you. And until next time, be thou
a good night
and true.